Over the years, many different locomotives pulled Germany's last royal train. But unlike the royal coaches themselves, were they an expression of Prussian austerity, but nonetheless of historical and technical significance. One of them in particular. While the coaches of the royal train had to fulfill a plethora of special demands, were the requirements for the pulling locomotives pretty much identical to regular express locomotives, thus avoiding the need for a dedicated development. Kaiser Wilhelm II's regular short-distance excursions, with just a shortened version of the royal train, could even be successfully hauled by older express locomotives. So was the 1888-built Prussian S that was specifically set aside for royal duties deemed sufficient until 1906, when it was replaced by a more modern machine, an S5.2. But for the more sporadic longer journeys, often utilizing the complete consist of coaches, the situation is a bit more complicated. Not only were those trains typically led by two locomotives, there were also no locomotives permanently set aside for those duties. The respective locomotives that were referred to as royal locomotives were also used in regular service when not needed. And studying old photos leads you to a different impression altogether. It seems that the locomotives used were simply those locomotives that just were available at any given moment, rather than being specifically allocated for the royal train. And that leads to a huge variety of pulling power, from tank engines for branch line excursions, all the way to the ever size increasing express locomotives, peaking with the S10 family. But also the industrious P8s could be seen leading the train, as well as foreign locomotives when traveling abroad. But by far the most frequently pictured locomotive is the Prussian S3. And that for some very good reasons. So let's take a closer look at it. It wasn't Prussia's first compound express locomotive. It wasn't Prussia's first 440 express locomotive. It was certainly not Prussia's first serial production express locomotive. But it was the first one to combine all three of these things. And that was a big deal. Already in 1884, tested Prussia compound express locomotives with the Hanover variant of their, according to the later introduced classification system of 1906, S1 class, reusing the exhaust steam from the high-pressure cylinder in the low-pressure cylinder on the other side, promised fuel savings of about 15 to 20%. But there was one problem. The locomotives had a difficult time starting, as by design initially only the high-pressure cylinder would receive steam, and under some circumstances these locomotives would not start at all. And even though special valves were available which allowed fresh steam with a reduced pressure to be directly fed to the low pressure cylinder during starting, they were still very unreliable. As a result, were only ever S1 locomotives with simple expansion built in series. Oh, and in German, by the way, there is a completely different term for that. A simple expansion locomotive is usually referred to as a Zwillingslokomotive, literally twin locomotive, referring to the two cylinders working in parallel. Not to be confused with this Zwilling, of course, even though that's also a simple expansion locomotive. While on the other hand the term compound locomotive is exactly the same in German, just translated, Verbundlokomotive. And when in 1890 the first prototypes that would later form the S2 class were delivered, the same story repeated itself. While the larger wheel arrangement of an 440 allowed for a more powerful boiler and promised better riding abilities, caused the compound machines, despite being more powerful and more economic than the conventional sisters, major issues starting up, and once again simple expansion was chosen for the serial builds. But as a result of Prussia's short 13-meter turntable stubby, and in combination with an unfavorable leading bogie design poorly running S2, should always remain just an intermezzo. Not more than 3 years, but many 16-meter turntables later, could the locomotive length be increased for smooth running. A superior bogie design was adapted, and soon after became at last a reliable valve mechanism available. Born was the Prussian S3. Without a doubt, one of Prussia's best and most successful locomotive designs. At 90 km per hour, its original top speed, later increased to 100, the S3 is capable of pulling up to 200 tons on level track, while making efficient use of the produced steam. The compound engine proved so successful that 26 S2s were rebuilt as such, and with more than 1000 S3s built from new, it became Germany's most numerous express locomotive. There were more S3s than all previous Prussian express locomotives combined. Add another 47 built for other railway companies, and over 700 machines of the Prussian P4.2, an almost identical passenger design with slightly smaller drivers introduced 5 years later in 1898. Oh, and one thing you might be wondering, which one of the two cylinders is now which? Well, you might have noticed the size difference. While the cylinder on the right, the driver's side, has about the usual size you would expect, is the one on the left, the fireman's side, just massive. Which gives away that this must be the low pressure cylinder, as the same amount of steam under less pressure needs more space. But even the great efficiency and reliability could not save the S3s from becoming the victims of progress. After only a few years, became many express trains too heavy for them, requiring a second engine, a needlessly expensive practice. So in 1905, the S3's production was fluidly superseded by the more powerful S5.2, originally referred to as Verstärkte S3, strengthened S3. But the S3s continued to be of great value for lighter express and passenger trains, and it wasn't until 1927, by now referred to as Class 13.0, that Deutsche Reichsbahn withdrew the last one of them, with some of the ones now belonging to Poland even surviving the Second World War. A respectable service life, but still way too early in history to be saved by railway preservation, and apparently not significant enough to be saved by official means. And every single one of them disappeared. Nowadays, virtually forgotten, the S3 stands as one of Germany's railway history's greatest losses. But only because it was one of its greatest successes to begin with. Thank you Dave Heise for commissioning the Royal Series. And thank you all my channel members, including Contrian, Denman Den, Getter Fur, Kay Frankly, Lucas Ilskens, Macan1220, Manus Mober, Martin Zotan Vigican, Michael Beck, SGT Scuba, Søren Dominic Cook, Steamy Player, and Void Elder for allowing me to continue this channel.